Welcome, everyone. I'm David Levi Strauss, chair of the MFA program in art writing here at the Mobile School of Visual Arts. Tonight, we're here to celebrate the publication of Amy Sillman's new book from After 8 Books in Paris, Amy Sillman Faux Pas, Selected Writings and Drawings, which is just out. It has an amazing foreword by Lynne Tillman that begins this way, quote, "To writers, words are material, they're matter, they're only stuff. Words have value in themselves, tricky beasts, relished, debated, hated. Amy Sillman values words." I've known this for quite a long time, that Amy Sillman values words, but this book is the first major physical manifestation of that. I knew Amy first in a teaching situation, since we were both teaching in the MFA program at Bard College for many years. And I heard her use words to respond to artworks in astonishing ways. I've always been around painters, and painters who are talkers sometimes develop highly distinctive ways to talk about art. After a while, they begin to use language as they use other materials or media, and they discover specific qualities and features and use them to make something surprising. As in her paintings and drawings and videos and other works, Sillman uses words to do things you're not supposed to do in that context. Hence, faux pas, false step. This can keep a reader on her toes, which is not a bad place to be. For those of you who don't know, Amy Sillman is a painter who has lived and worked in New York City since 1975. She earned her BFA in 1979 right here at SVA and her MFA from Bard College in 1995. Sillman's work is based on drawing, improvisation, and a process she describes as raveling and unraveling at once, negotiating the terrain that lies between things, such as figuration and abstraction, writing and image, the intimate scale of the hand, and a larger sense of meaning that unfurls in physical space. A mid-career traveling survey show, One Lump or Two, curated by Helen Molesworth, started at the ICA in Boston in 2013. Last fall, she curated the exhibition The Shape of Shape for MoMA's reopening, accompanied by a zine entitled Shapes, produced for MoMA magazine. Sillman is represented by Gladstone Gallery in New York City, where her current solo show, Twice Removed, will be on view until November 14th, 2020. And another show, The All Over, will open July 1st at Porticus in Frankfurt, Germany. Please welcome Amy Sillman.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Annette, Sophia, SVA. And actually, I thank you everyone for coming to this, for being here. I'm really honored to speak here. And I want to thank After 8 Books for the incredible honor of approaching me and telling me, Boise, Idaho. I want to thank After 8 Books for inviting me literally to have a book, because, you know, I don't really know how you get a book, but they asked me if they could publish a book of my various writings, and we worked on it for a long time, and I feel incredibly lucky for some reasons that I would like to talk to you about later, because David and I talked about it. But I thank Lynne Tillman for writing a foreword, and I think Michael Smith, who made some illustrations for the book of pictures of John Chamberlain. And I thank Charlotte, Francois, Benjamin, and Antonia in Paris at After 8 Books for an amazing experience. And I just want to correct one small thing. I had a show a couple of years ago at Porticus, but actually it already happened. So that's not coming up, just so you know. You have, David, your sound is off.
I thought I just saw an efflux. Maybe it was an old efflux.
I don't know. you
Sorry,
know,
sorry.
deja
I'm sure
vu,
you know better
deja
than.
vu all over again. Um, hi, what should we do next?
Read.
Oh, would you like me to read? Would you like me to start off like right away reading? I can.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, cool. I will do that. We talked about a couple of little things. I'm not going to read forever, but I'm going to read a little bit. Here's the book. And the book contains work that I published for about 10 years, not all of it. But among the things that we collected was an essay that I wrote in 2016 in December. So I guess it was, no, it was published in December 15. So it means it was written before the last election. And it was a piece that I wrote called Shit Happens, and it's about awkwardness. And the way it came about was that an editor there asked me, Pablo Larios, who's a really great guy, asked me if I would write about a thing, because they had a series where they would get artists to write about objects. And I said, I don't want to write about an object. How about if I write about a feeling? And he said, okay, what will it be? And then I got uncomfortable and I thought maybe it should be about, it should really be about awkwardness. And what I meant by awkwardness was that I wanted to try to write about, without having known what I was doing, I wanted to write about this thing that I feel like isn't written about, which is what it feels like to make a thing when you don't know what the thing you're making is. In other words, what improvisational form feels like from the inside. So I tried really hard to write very specifically about that. And I'm going to read 3 pages from that essay. I hope you can hear me properly. So I'm just cutting in right in the middle of the essay. I spent last year reading Ovid and was excited to learn about a Roman poetry meter called choliambic or lame iambic, in which the stress at the end of the line purposefully comes down on the wrong foot, giving the line an unexpected little thud or some punch, da-dum, 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 dum. The offbeat turns around and questions the whole rest of the line and is therefore a signal of the poet's aggression or satire. The idea of an ignoble form named for limping put me in mind of the way Mr. Hulot walks in Jacques Tati's Mr. Hulot's Holiday from 1953. Mr. Hulot's funny walk is a running gag throughout the film, a symptom marking his difference from the rest of the bourgeois holiday goers. He skitters along like a sand crab and ends up alone, even though he gets a dance with the pretty girl at the costume ball. Tati's movies deftly portray the comic mechanics of modern living, almost as illustrations of Henri Bergson's quotient about the comic, the starting point for which he says is, quote, something mechanical encrusted upon the living, unquote. In the digital age, this relationship of the mechanical and the living also goes the other way around. The living weight of the body is encrusted like a barnacle upon the perfection of the algorithm. Just having a body is a daily comedy. From the control tower of the head, one gazes downward, always downward, upon this loose, baggy monster that we find ourselves in, this laughable casement that is the body below. As ankles swell, farts are emitted, rolls of fat jut out, the penis does its own thing. Shit happens and then you die. It's not an accident that people say awkward after a faux pas, a moment of tension between the ideal and the real, where what's supposed to happen goes awry. The real, like the body, is embarrassing. Your hand is too moist, your fly is open, there turns out to be something on your nostril, somebody blurts out something that I wasn't supposed to know, your ex-partner shows up with their new lover and your work is uncool. but you're stuck there. That tension is what abstraction is partly about. The subject no longer entirely in control of the plot, representation peeled away from realness. This ambivalent state is precisely the state of mind for making a painting, being stuck with the uncertain future of the lovable but fallible body that is the artwork. Oil painters work with a substance that's low anyway, putty, shit, dirt, mud that is scraped, pushed, smeared, scumbled into form. After a while, your body is the partner to the materials. You are the medium as well as your tool. The boundaries between you and your object become unclear, mirroring and antagonizing each other. The art-making process is a recording of these restless interactions between subject and object on a par with one another, locked together. In fact, really, improvisation is about working between subject and object. The object is merely a place through which questions are addressed. Perhaps this is particular to abstract painting, where you often don't really know what you're doing. And so you are doomed to work in between hoping and groping. In abstraction, time goes by in fits and starts, with resistance of materials being part of that time. Like the body, you look down at your creation and think, my God, you are ugly. I know of no artist who is attempting to make something more beautiful, but I do know many artists who are looking for a form that feels right without knowing why. Maybe it's just satisfying to see something productive come of feeling like an idiot, and the accompanying feeling of embarrassment. Isn't embarrassment what Kafka's Metamorphosis is partly about? The book matter-of-factly narrates Gregor Samsa's miserable discovery that he is a bug, while the real drama is the Samsa family's embarrassment to be living with a bug and their relief when Gregor finally dies. He literally dies of embarrassment because the family no longer knows how to take care of him. Kafka's Bug, a good example of making do with what you're stuck with when you've got a body, is a contrast to the much-cited Bartleby position, I'd prefer not to, which is an aesthetic style of negation. The awkwardness I'm trying to describe is not a style, but could be one result of a dialectic. I would rather call it a metabolism, the intimate and discomforting process of things changing as they go awry, look uncomfortable, have to be confronted, repaired, or risked, i.e., the process of trying to figure something out while doing it. I don't know if that's abstraction, but I know it's awkward. Finding a form is building these feelings, in this case, dissatisfaction, embarrassment, and doubt, into a substance. This is a very fragile thing to do. So that's my kind of manifesto on, I don't know, that's a core part of my sense of trying to write about, I don't know, the thing you can't write about
Yeah.
while you're doing it.
I mean, it brings up something that I really wanted to talk with you about. When you say, perhaps this is particular to abstract painting where you often don't really know what you're doing. And so you are doomed to work between hoping and groping. So that thing of not knowing seems very accurate to writing to me, in my experience. If I know something, I don't need to write about it. I only write about it to try to know. And I write because I don't know. So the question is, do you paint because you don't know? And do you not know different things when you write? Or how connected or disconnected are these two activities in terms of knowing and not knowing? Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know, I think that there's a way, this is just my experience, because I'm just me and I only know how to do this kind of thinking in my own brain and body. And I'm not making any pronouncements whatsoever about this being any kind of, this is not a truth claim. This is a personal, you know, kind of a personal thing to me. It's about process. It's what literally people call process. I think I do make paintings that are partly abstract, or the way in which I feel that they're abstract, is that they're not always descriptive of what you can see. They're not optical, they're kind of tactile. And that, I think, comes directly out of not really understanding even abstraction itself. I don't know, not understanding what it's supposed to be like, what it's supposed to look like. It was a huge revelation to me when I was a student. I was a student at SVA as a painter. And it was a huge revelation to me when I realized that I was allowed to make, this sounds so horrible, but I was allowed to make an abstract painting. In other words, I was shown abstraction as this kind of official style. And it was like, I moved to New York in the 70s, and it was already installed as an official style. And I didn't really understand it. And I thought that there were some logical things you had to work your way through, like it was a math problem or something. I thought, like, to look at a Mondrian, or to look at anything, to look at any Russian constructivist, or to look at a Malevich, or a Louise Bourgeois, or Susan Rothberg, or whatever. I looked at an Elizabeth Murray. I thought you had to know something to kind of get it or make it. And I didn't. It took me educating myself at SVA. Like, during my undergrad years, I realized that, oh, you're allowed to do whatever you want. It literally is a kind of gap space, between things. That's what I understood about abstract painting, and that's from the 70s. That's very much about the time that I was going to school, because I think I came after post-minimalism, where, it was partly about not just systems or something, but it was kind of about the psychology of the work entering the room with the sort of structure, right? So it wasn't just like form or structure, it was form, structure, and then how you felt in the place where you were, your context. So I already learned it as an impure thing, not a clean system. That's what I was able to understand at school, that I had a right to the impure adjustment process that was painting, and to the mess, and to the not really getting anywhere. It wasn't a teleological process. So I understood that, and then I went off and was really happy to do that. And then I wasn't writing. And then I also just really loved the concrete and precise tools that are available in language. Where if I say the word cavalcade, you know exactly what I mean. And that's not necessarily the way a painting works, especially if you believe that, like, painting is this constant adjustment of impurities, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, it's like I know more when there's language, because there's a vocabulary, and there's a um, a rhetoric, and I don't know, a structure, kind of an infrastructure there, that I can kind of point to some very precise place with you. I can't always do that with you in painting, because I can do whatever I want, and you don't have to know what it is. It's kind of more of a code or an internal thing for me to kind of find those grades. So it's like there's different kinds of not knowing. But then in language, like, I read a beautiful thing the other day by Kafka, where he says language is so pathetic. It's such a servant to, like, what's really there. Like, it's always the, like, descriptor or the second place thing. And, isn't it pathetic? Isn't it sad how language is so dependent? Yeah, exactly. I wholeheartedly will vote for, well, not this time. I don't want to throw that vote away, but anyway, in my heart, I'm voting for Kafka. And anyway, he talks about this thing. I read this beautiful thing that he wrote about, like, how isn't it sad and pathetic how language is stuck just being like a handmaiden. It just is what you have, a tool. And in that way, like, there's this gap where you can't know the things you know in painting and in language, and you can't do it at the same time, and you can't know the things in language that you can know in painting, and you can't do them at the same time. And I am possessed by the project of this bridge, trying to slap these planks over the abyss.
I mean, it's when you've talked a few places about how it was in teaching really that you literally acquired a voice, or a voice came in, a way to use language to talk about art, because you had to do that in that situation. I have a couple questions about that. One is, I mean, one of the things I've noticed about you is you really love learning, and that can
I'm a
be,
nerd.
yeah, you're a nerd, and that can be contagious. You're a contagious nerd, and you can develop, I think you can develop that in teaching. I think that's a secret to teaching, is spreading that contagion, being a super spreader of that desire. But so that kind of, I think, drives your use of language and the attraction to writing. But I'm fascinated by the split. And I mean, you've also said that you would never write and paint in the same area of time. I mean, it has to be completely separated.
Yeah,
Um,
I can't.
do, do you do you this is do you write in the morning?
No, if I have an assignment for writing, I don't usually really, honestly, like I only, it's funny. I tell my students, and I really believe this, that the worst thing you can ever do is paint for a show. Like, I don't believe in that. I think that's totally bullshit. I think you need to make your work, make tons of mistakes, throw tons of it away. I distrust intensely people who only make the work that they need to produce for an exhibition. But it's funny because then I say that and I'm like, oh, well, I only produce the writing that I have to do, to fulfill assignments. But that's because I'm not really I'm not an art critic. I'm not a poet. I'm not an essayist. I'm a person who finds that painting has an inadequacy or a lack or an edge open, like a gaping hole that I can't fill with, like, the rest of painting. It has to go bleed out into the language area. So I write like in the same way, like you say, like to because of of a belief in, well, I write, because people ask me to write things, and then of course, the sub thing is, if I knew about it, I wouldn't do it. So I like write about things that I feel like I need to learn more about, or that I'm having an argument with. Usually I write to argue, and I paint to wrestle.
Mm,
That's my system.
mm.
It's all antagonism, but painting is for me like literally physically wrestling. Like I always think that movie by what's his name, The Wrestler, is the story of abstract expressionism. It's like this big hulking thing
Art
who
must-
literally like, yeah, exactly. He can literally like staple into his own skin. I always thought that there should be a whole essay that I should write about how that movie is the story of Abax. It's an ugly old horrible freak, and you can look at it as such. But anyway, yeah, and if you're a real nerd, all you do when you learn is that you keep expanding your area of ignorance. Like you learn a little bit and then you're like, holy shit, I didn't read Hegel. Oh, holy fuck, I didn't read Kant. Oh, god damn it, I didn't read Schlegel, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
So, I
yeah.
mean, you can't, you just keep not knowing more when you try to learn stuff. And that's why I like learning. And then you can write more because there's more shit you don't know about that you have to write about. I I wrote the essay about shapes during the beginning of the pandemic, and it was entirely to try to argue about something that I did not understand at all. Um, Something about composition.
That's an amazing first sentence. I mean, basically, I haven't got it right here, but you just say, I've never read anything that makes sense about shape. Um, to start from that. And yeah, a couple of years ago, I realized that I barely knew anything about shape.
That was partly because, I mean, this essay had a ton of different, I was actually hoping we could talk about it, or I could read a bunch of it, because it has a lot of things I've been thinking about kind of packed in, and it's a very rambling, somebody said, what is that quote in? It's called Further Notes on Shape. It's in the book, and it's also an essay that I published on the MoMA magazine that was basically the zine that I made for this show that I curated at MoMA last year that was called The Shape of Shape. But the whole thing was devoted to me trying to figure something out about composition and about shape. And then also underneath it all, to argue against the idea of anti-composition. The whole thing is an argument against anti-composition.
Yeah. And you also, I mean, in terms of knowing and not knowing, you say at some point, I guess it's in the interview, about that when you wrote about Delacroix, you read everything that's ever been written about Delacroix. When you wrote about John Chamberlain, you read everything that's ever been written, which to me is, I mean, I think that's what you have to do, but most people don't do that. It's because you want to add to the conversation, right? I mean, you don't want to say something that somebody else has already elaborated. You want to say something.
I mean, usually, yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, all right.
Yeah, all I wanted, I mean, you actually a long time ago, you said, do you write in the morning? And I realized I didn't even answer. Like, I just write all day until the thing's done. I write all day and all night until the thing is done, usually a month. I usually write from the beginning, it's because I'm having an argument. Like I wrote about abstract expressionism after somebody I know said something stupid about it. And I thought, God damn it. And I wrote that thing. And then I wrote about shape, partly because I was like, wait, I was in a color theory reading group with 7 friends for 7 years. We read everything we could. We tried to read every single thing there was about color. We didn't totally make it to everything, but we got pretty far. And I was like, and then we moved on to psychoanalysis. Like it never even, nobody wanted to read about it. It was like next thing, like wasn't shape. And shape wasn't something that anyone I'd ever talked to had like really talked to me about. And I started asking people that I know who are scholars, and I'd be like, what do you know about shape? And they'd be like, well, I think there's a book about it. There's an Arnheim book. And I was like, no, that's about visual perception, but what about shape? And then they'd be like, well, Michael Fried wrote about it. And I was like, no, that's about like what shapes are right. I want to just know about like, what are they? And then I was also, this is a longer thing, but I was arguing against, I noticed there's just a few things that I saw. A lot of the chat stuff is going by. I'm not going to read it because then I won't be able to think, speak. But I noticed a couple of people said, something about anti-composition. I mean, there is a art historical idea that is essentially, I think, inherited from the Russian avant-garde or from early 20th century avant-garde and how it moves into the post-war period and then into the 60s. That's sort of about like composition as a bourgeois, old, fusty thing. It's something they were arguing about, in Russia at the turn of the revolution, where they were like, we don't want to compose, we don't want to make composition. That's a bourgeois thing to do. We want to construct. We're constructing a new world. We're not sitting around with rules inherited from academies. We want nothing to do that with this putrid old regime. We want to make a new world with our hands. We need to make stoves and coats and new art, new form. And what I was thinking about was that sounds just fine, but not everybody was in the Russian Revolution. And since then, there were all these other people who have been marginalized all this time. There were artists, Black artists, you know, queer artists, disabled artists, women artists, trans artists, all kinds of artists that are not living in New York, not part of the avant-garde, working class people who have full-time jobs as, you know, toll collectors, people that are not included in so-called avant-garde. And what have they been doing all this time? They're all super important, and their voices have been cut out of this teleology, this strict, narrow line about what's supposed to be radical. And screw that, you know, that's why everybody loves G's Ben quilts, you know, because they're such an amazing form of abstract art, you know, for totally different purposes and with totally different material, you know, intentions, you know, than, you know, the regular avant-garde. And I was like, you know, there's all this other stuff going on that has to do with the body and abstraction and making and loving making and composition and drawing and all these things that are supposed to be like, you know, painting is dead, but a lot of people are doing it anyway. And I just felt like it was time to bring that circle around to another place and go like, wait a minute, there's a politics to making stuff. You know, there's a way in which, you know, making stuff is a way to stay alive, to express some form of what feels like freedom, you know, or emancipation or joy, you know. And so I wanted to revisit like what constitutes okay, you know. And so I was arguing against anti-composition as what I felt was like an old stricture that we can ignore.
Yeah. I mean, you have an argument with the history of art history.
Yeah, and that's it's not an argument against the art, it's an argument against the art history. And that was the reason for the AbX article, which was about, in a way, it was about abstract expressionism as it was used, as I saw it being used by trans people who were, a lot of them were younger than me. And I noticed their work in form and in abstraction in a way. And I thought, they're not sitting around worrying if painting is dead. You know, they're making stuff with their bodies, but they're thinking of their bodies anew. You know, and if they're, you know, they're not essentializing anything. And the sort of discourse of like, what's cool, what's good, what's new, what's fresh, what's avant-garde, what's rule breaking. It was just like, forget all that stuff, you know. And that was why I wanted to reconsider stuff.
One of the places where I really thought that, I mean, the John Chamberlain piece really surprised me, because I just hadn't thought about John Chamberlain that way at all. And that piece was to me like you were going into the past and shoving the furniture around of criticism, shoving the furniture around, busting things up, and just taking what's useful to build something else. I mean, it's really, you really wreak havoc in that with the way people had presented Chamberlain before and the way he's been, the way people looked at it, especially.
But you know,
go ahead.
Well, go ahead. I mean, I want to give due respect though to the people that I read, because like you pointed out, I went to Dia every day for a month and read the whole shelf. But actually in that literature, I read Brian O'Doherty, I read Donna DeSalvo, I read, you know, Klaus Curtis, I read Donald Judd, you know, I read all the people who had written about Chamberlain and loved Chamberlain. I read de Kooning on Chamberlain. I read all this stuff that was so great, and it was just that nobody had put the dots together. I mean, I had my feeling about what was great about him, which was partly that he's trashy. And I was interested in this kind of bad taste, you know, like what the hell? That was the beginning of that essay. It always starts with like noticing something that's an argument or weird or wrong, like wrong. And in that case, it was like John Chamberlain. Lynn Cook came to me and she said, would you like to give one of these Dia Artist on Art talks? And she said, you can pick anyone in the collection. And I was like, oh, I'm going to pick John Chamberlain, because what the hell is he even doing in there? It looks gaudy and terrible. It's awful. it's trashy. And why is it even in this house of class, you know, this upper echelon minimal church, you know, why is it even there? And actually it was funny because Lynn, I love Lynn, but Lynn did say sort of something like, maybe you'd rather write about Blinky Palermo. And I went, no, I don't want to at all. I want to write about this trashy weirdo who, by the way, and I don't know if anyone read my essay or saw my lecture, claims to have invented the beehive hairdo and was a hairdresser before he was a sculptor. And I mean, it's just hilarious. And he did all this crazy stuff. He was friends with the Supremes. He loved pop music. He talked about making, as he said, I want to make things the way you crumple toilet paper when you're in the bathroom, you know. And he said it's all about the fit and the ill fitting, and he never used like screws and hammer, you know, connective things. He just would crumple and place, and his whole work is about this act of like crushing and placing. And it's this
And
fascinating thing about the hand.
talk about being influenced by poets. I mean, so he was at Black Mountain. He was best friends with Creeley. He was there when Olson was running the thing. And so all of that, which I had completely forgotten about.
Well, that's why projective verse comes out all the time in that.
Yeah.
Maybe it comes in that essay, but because of what I learned reading so much about, I learned so much about Black Mountain and Olson from doing my homework assignment that I gave myself on Chamberlain. That was my way to really look at that. And Olson comes up, the projective verse essay comes up a lot in my writing because, you know, I understood him as saying something that he didn't quite say it this way, but I understood him as saying something. He did say poetry rides out of the breath of the poet. And what I kind of thought about from that was that if it rides out of the breath, it means that it hits the ground like a point. And then that point that is a map in a way of where those points hit the ground like darts, that's your terrain. That's your field. And then you work in that. I mean, it's not precise, it's a metaphor. But then the way that that worked with Chamberlain was there gluing. He was busy making collages. And it was through Olson and Creeley saying, I think it was actually Olson who said to him, faster, faster, which is like a line from from projective verse. And he was this dumb sculptor dude. I don't mean, sorry, sculptors, I don't mean, I mean with quotes around it, but he was like, yeah, faster, faster. How can I get this stuff down faster? And he started to use the staple gun instead of the glue, literally to kind of fulfill his poetic teacher's instruction of speed.
Yeah.
And then from the staples, he went to crumpling and placing.
There, I was thinking about description. I mean, people who don't write often think that describing something is easy. It turns out that it's one of the most difficult things to do. And it's kind of a tell in a writer. And your descriptions, I mean, there were a couple of examples of it that I wanted you to read, but maybe we're not going to have time.
You can tell me. I wanted to read part of the shape essay, but I'm happy to read. What's the part you like? I can read it.
It's the beginning of the Rachel Harrison use of color thing. And again, it's like a signal, the way that you use description there.
Should I read it?
Yeah, can you just read the beginning?
Sure. Just stop me when it's time to stop. The essay's called, which was also I mean, I want to thank Rachel and the people who made a book that she invited me to contribute to. It was during the time when I was in that color theory reading group, and we had read Wittgenstein on Remarks on Color, which I think is one of the the only the three things that I truly loved reading about color when we were in that group, above all, it was Albers. It was because in Albers, you know, color is relational, and it's really an important part of the whole idea of the embodied subject. The other thing I liked, though, we all loved it, was the Wittgenstein, because it's so weird. Like, he says such weird things. Like, he says, imagine a brown traffic light. And that's one of his remarks. I mean, it's just a really nutty book. But anyway, so I wrote something that was kind of indebted to Wittgenstein's title, Remarks on Color, which was a few remarks on Rachel Harrison's use of color. And there are two quotes at the very beginning. One is Merleau-Ponty: a naked color is not a chunk of absolutely hard, indivisible being, ever gaping open, less a color or a thing, therefore than a difference between things and colors, not a thing, but a possibility, a latency, a flesh of things. And then there was also like a little quote that I got because her show is called Consider the Lobster. And I wrote this little quote from a Moholy-Nagy movie. The lobster is pugnacious. His manners are thoroughly unpleasant. He is always prepared to have a row. Color, number one. Color plays a forceful character in Rachel Harrison's farcical situations. Absurdity generally prevails over gravitas. Yellow trumps green, and lady-shaped mugs man form. A phallic green sculpture is goofed up by a blonde wig. A bunch of dumb dark green trash bags hunkered down lugubriously on the floor, concealing something ominous, but their weight is cheerfully rigged up to a pulley system made of canary yellow ropes. And the only words you could really use to describe the shape loitering over in the sheetrock corner would be hot orange or boobs.
That's kind of, yeah.
Two. Oh, I can keep, well, you want me to stop?
Yeah, that gives us, I mean, I just, it seems like when you're describing what is in front of you, that basic active phrases is where you get the real tension between trying to describe something in words that is visual, and that it can't be complete to your experience of it because your body is responding to it, and there are all kinds of things that just aren't available to language or are resistant to language. So to me, again, with any writer that's a tell, how they describe something that in that way, just directly.
Well, I mean, I realized actually talking to this guy, I told you that I had talked to this guy the other day named Robert Enright, who's the editor of Border Crossings. And I was also doing a little interview with him, a written interview about my book. And he was asking me like about being a critic. And I was like, I'm not a critic. I don't have judgment to pass. I'm not saying what's good and bad. And I don't have a polemic. I don't have a truth claim. In fact, I have the opposite of a truth claim. The only thing my job is to do is to describe the friction between states and forms and systems. And I need to, like, I feel like that's not written about very much. And actually, recently I was talking to a friend, Ben Pickett, who was part editor of a 2-volume tome on the history and the practice of improvisation. And he told me, you know, we couldn't even find a writer about visual art for our encyclopedic tome about improvisation, you know, because like nobody wrote about it, you know. And I was like, you know, that's my job, I think, is literally to try to push and resuscitate and negotiate and cajole and haggle between two systems. And thank you, parents, for getting divorced, because I'm sure that's where it comes from.
We're going to run out of time. There's so many things that I wanted to ask you about. I mean, one thing is how you approach subjectivity. You talk a lot about subjectivity. I've been thinking and writing a lot about the current, what I think of as assaults on social subjectivity. But is there anything that I'm trying to think right now of writing in the book that it's through.
Oh, there's something I mean, if I'm allowed, there's something I really, really love about subjectivity. Can I read it? It's
Yeah.
really like half a. Okay, so it is the beginning of further notes on shape. A couple of years ago, I realized I barely knew anything about shape. I didn't even know where to begin reading about it, aside from a few books on still life and one on the psychology of perception. This was odd because everything in the world is a shape. It's so mundane and so ubiquitous. Every edge, corner, blob, form, silhouette, or negative space is something you have to navigate to get through a room. If you think of shape as figure ground, then every shape is a figure and the ground is the whole world. Shapes are how you make distinctions, get the lay of the land, or even tell time. And doesn't everyone have two shapes, really? The first is your own body, which you can't get out of. The second is your shadow, which you can't get rid of. Shadows don't talk back and don't cast shadows themselves. They just do whatever you do and go wherever you go. Your shadow is your personal shape, your silent companion, your own flat echo. It's worse than your ego, it's your creep, always just there. In the mythology of shadow, the devil can snip yours from your feet and make off with it. But if he takes it away, you miss it terribly. In a way, then, isn't your shadow kind of like your subjectivity?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was a lot about what I thought about.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, obviously you're not a critic, you're not an art critic, but you are a reader of criticism, a collector even. I mean, you often, well, because you're reading everything that it was produced around somebody, like you read Hilton Kramer's New York Times review of Chamberlain's work in 1971, of interest now primarily to researchers gathering data on the wayward tastes of another era. That's how Kramer positioned and dismissed Chamberlain. But do you, do you think, or how do you think about, I always think that writers imagine readers into existence. They imagine they're a reader for the work. How do you think about readers? I mean, I ask also because a lot of your writing has a strange quality in that it's for, like On Color is for painters, but it's also for people who aren't painters. And that's a very difficult balance to keep up, because you're being pulled in kind of two directions at once in the actual language and in the address. But I don't know, how do you think about who's the ideal reader?
I think that my ideal reader is someone who is is it's funny to say this, but it's basically a formalist. I mean, but it's not ist, it's not the ist part. It's a person, my ideal reader is a person who loves nuance and is really picky and attentive to language, but like someone who can do a crossword puzzle or play Pictionary, not afraid of it, let's say. But
Mm.
my ideal reader is also someone who's not afraid of form. And I think a lot of people are either afraid of it or intimidated by it or put off by it or angered by it for all the things that it represents. And I'm just saying form, capital F, like it was a person. But I mean, if you really think about it, if you pretend that form is a person, which I liked, I do anthropomorphize everything in the writing. Like I'll say I feel bad for abacts, or I'll talk about form as it was, you know, say like I broke up with abstraction. And I mean, I feel like I'm I'm reaching out to a person who believes in and loves the physical material weirdness of the things that you make with your body that you don't really know what you're doing. But maybe that person doesn't have as much comfort with language or description or, you know, this or crossword puzzles as I do. And so I kind of feel like I'm trying to offer a negotiation for them. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Like that's my ideal reader is somebody, you know, or maybe I'm describing my ideal student, you know, but maybe it's the wrong thing. Like the ideal reader, I don't know. I don't have an
Hmm.
ideal reader because I never had readers before. I don't think that way. Like I'm not a writer. I don't have readers. But my ideal person in an audience of painting, or the only audiences I have are painting and teaching, right? Those are the rooms where I know I have receivers. So I like receivers who, well, of course, everyone likes receivers who love you, you know, and who want to get with the you know, people like to have receivers that are receptive. And I want, you know, I'm writing for people who love the idea that form is not some fusty old bourgeois bullshit. Um, but I'm offering some alibi.
Mhm, mhm. What is the speaking body?
I mean, I noticed when I was doing the shape show, this really became clear to me, that there was this bifurcation in 20th century art history where there was this phenomenology wing where things were all material and event, or being or grace, or, you know, any of the things that get described in action painting and minimalism and post minimalism. There's this sort of physical being, right? And then on the other hand, there's the linguistic wing. And the linguistic wing is like all the conceptual experiments that have happened in the 20th century and the turns toward language that have happened, which would mean that form is basically a kind of language, which I do not believe. And so the speaking body was the way that I could name the space between the phenomenal and the linguistic and talk about it as needing to be activated. And I think that's a radical project of
Mm.
radical politics, actually. But I think that it's not an activist politics precisely. It's not going to, you know, get somebody elected or, you know, overthrow the government precisely, but it's got to be there in the world or we're screwed. You know, there's got to be this negotiation between the phenomena of life and death, which is basically your body, and then the like strange mesh of like rules that are kind of in the air, in the ether, that are, you can break them, but only, you know, in language, you only break them within the language in some way, even if it's crazy poetry that breaks the, you know, the grammar, it's still uttered, you know, in the form of these little units that are like letters or sounds or syllables or words. And I'm trying really hard to do both. I want both. And I want to, you know, enact or make exciting this realm of curiosity and trouble and inadequacy in a way that exists between these two poles.
And where are we at now in that?
we're we're not in good shape.
Yeah, yeah.
Where do you think we're at? We're in terrible
Not
shape.
good, not
Thank,
good.
thank God there's writing students that exist out there. 100 of them or something, because I mean, I think that like the rhetoric that we've inherited on many levels, on every level, is horrible.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Sophia, are you there?
Indeed, I am.
Amy, do you want to, there are a lot of people out there. and I'm sure they're
Hi, everyone.
to ask you.
I can see a grand total of literally one person on my little screen thing, and it's Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
If you hit the gallery view, what do you get?
If I hit gallery view, it's too many, so I'm gonna go back to, then it looks like you're at the synagogue on high holidays.
So should we, Sophia, have you collected some?
Yes, we do have a few questions in the wings. I also find that as soon as you get the Q&A going, people's brains kind of turn on. So
Yeah.
it's a good moment to transition. First up, I know at the beginning, Shoshana wanted you to expand a bit more on anti-composition. Shoshana, I'm going to hand you the mic. You'll get a little prompt on your screen that allows you to voice it if you wish.
Hey, hi Amy, hi David.
Hi.
My dog is gonna bark. But Amy, you answered the question very, very amazingly. So thank you.
I thought I answered it too. Can we move on?
Definitely. Enzo,
But thanks, Shoshana.
Enzo, I'm coming over to you.
Enzo.
Do you want to take the mic? I can also read it. Oh, there you are.
Oh,
Hi.
hey, am I on the mic?
Yeah.
Yep, you're on the
Cool.
mic.
Oh, I wrote my question and it was just, I think it's in the chat actually.
But
You
what
were-
does it say? Because I don't see it.
The difference between form and shape. At what point do you think one
Oh.
creates from another?
At
Well-
what point do I think one what?
I was just wondering if there is a difference between form and shape. I don't know if there is, but I was just kind of off the top of my head. I was wondering if they have different connotations or something.
I think that form has the connotation of any kind of mass of material of any kind, but I feel like shape has more of an idea of an outside of that mass, like a limited kind of a measure or a quantity or a quantifiable edge or something like that. So I think that shape is more specific in the sense that it's sort of about like, you know, even if it's a not geometric shape, if if you even say it's a blob, or we can talk about where the blob has like a weird, knob sticking out of it, where like I think form is a more general kind of thing. I think in
Right.
German they're the same. Maybe I'm
Uh-huh.
really wrong. I do know one thing in German, if you talk about paint or you talk about color, it's the same word.
Mhm.
And so, like sometimes in other languages, they're divided differently or they're accumulated differently. I mean, probably we have shape and form because we have a composite language. I don't know if that's true, but I think shape is more about the calculable.
Yeah. Wait, I don't know if I'm on the mic.
You are.
You're on the mic, Enzo.
Okay. Yeah. No, because when you said that that you hadn't found any writings on shape, I thought what like word gets like used instead of that, and maybe it's form.
Well, no writing is about it. I mean, there was hardly any writing about it. There was hardly any writing about the phenomenon, the way that there are many, many, many books on color, right? But that's because color has definable properties that like have a spectrum, like a rainbow or a bunch of different ones. And so you can talk about it from optics, or you can talk about it from, musical tones, or you can talk about, these steps across that spectrum a number of different ways, or in terms of like radioactivity or something like that. But in shape, there's like no overview. there's no kind of like, you know, there's no, again, to use the word quantity, there's no quantity, there's no quantifiable thing about shape, because shape is literally everything. It's
Yeah.
anything. It's kind of like, it's kind of everything, and you can't have a book about everything. Like there's no steps on the ladder. There's no control for it. There's no end of it. Does that make sense?
Completely.
Well, next.
Thanks, Enzo. Nyasha, I'm coming to you next. You should get a prompt to turn your mic on now. I might be saying your name in a way that confuses you. Oh, there you go.
Hey, actually, you said it perfectly. Very impressive. Wow. But I just think I was just wanted to find out if you could expand on this phrase that she said earlier, that painting is a constant adjustment of impurities. I thought that was a really interesting way of describing painting, and I was wondering if she could, Amy, if you could expand on that.
Oh, thank you so much for that question. Actually, I will admit freely that I'm kind of paraphrasing from Philip Guston. I read all the issues. I read all of the 6 editions of a magazine from the 50s that was printed in New York called It Is. I did this to literally research, because I'm obviously a nerd and I do a lot of research. And I went to the MoMA library and I got out this magazine that was published by artists, because I wanted to read like what artists were saying about shape and about composition in the 50s in New York City. And there was this magazine, it's called It Is, period. It has like a period after it. And it was edited and written and, mostly contributed to by either artists, poets, philosophers, musicians, dancers, a lot of dancers actually. And the editor was this guy, Philip Pavia, who is a sculptor. And in the magazine, there were lots of round table discussions and arguments and transcripts of arguments and fights that people were having, and all these kind of interesting, contentious discussions about art, form, color, painting, gesture, politics. And there was one that I found where Ad Reinhardt was having a fight with Philip Guston in the article. And basically Ad Reinhardt says, oh, actually, wait, I can even tell you this. If you wait 1 second, I will tell you this, because I actually wrote about it in my shape essay, so I can actually quote it. There's this part where, oh, hold on. I'm sorry, wait 1 second. I really want, in a public discussion in 1960, Ad Reinhardt squabbled with Philip Guston and Jack Twerkoff. Ad Reinhardt declared, "Good artists have no need for content, nor any shape or form." And Guston and Twerkoff retorted that such an idea was ridiculous, and that painting was merely the adjustment of impurities. So that's what I was quoting. I don't remember exactly who said it, or who, maybe there was like, maybe Guston said it and then Twerkoff said yeah, or Guston said half of it and Twerkoff said the other. I mean, it was like a big fight they were all having, but they were arguing that it was an inherently impure thing to do, that there wasn't going to be like this position that Reinhardt was insisting on of like a pure repudiation of narrative, for instance. They were like, that's impossible.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Awesome.
But let me just I'll just say one other thing. I mean, the whole back end of the article that I wrote, that notion of the adjustment of impurities fit in perfectly to that whole essay, because the essay was essentially about this blob-like amorphous area of like where you can't say that something is definitively political or not.
Right.
Nice. Melissa, you asked a question. I'm going to ask you the mic.
Hi, Ames. Yeah, this is so wonderful. Congratulations on this beautiful book and smart book. And I wanted to know, because I was thinking about the history of your painting, and I haven't seen everything, of course, but I wondered about two things. One, it seems that you only include language or writing in your drawings. So that's more of a banal, like just where it is in your work, like meaning, does it enter into your painting at all? And two ways I thought it does is one through actually the relationship to shape and signification. And the other one, of course, are your titles, your fabulous titles. So I wonder if you could just talk about that relationship.
Well, thank you for the question. I don't think my paintings have words in them. I think my paintings are words, and I hang them as sentences when I hang a show. And so I think that my paintings create a grammar or a syntax in a room. And I try to deploy that as a sentence hung in a room. But I don't think that they don't have words in them, because I don't come to conclusions in my paintings. I keep rolling and rolling and rolling and destroying and destroying and destroying. And the thing is like a movie. And so I don't have these, I feel like words in a painting stop you, and they stop the painting, and they become some kind of relationship to the picture that's either a subtitle or a title or a caption or a footnote, or, you know, and I don't want that. I want the thing to have no end, to feel like it's roiling with transformation and movie-like endlessness. You know what I mean? So there's not that, it's not good. But I mean, I should say I didn't show any pictures, but the book is full of, I'm putting it on the screen because like the book is totally full of like drawings, and there's this, the book is all full of like
Want me to
jokes and
share
cartoons.
them, Amy?
Wait, what?
You want me to share them with the audience?
Oh, I can do it. Wait, let me do it.
Okay.
I'll
you got it.
do it. Should I?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Here, I'll, that's my, can you see my screen?
Yeah,
I
you
don't
gotta get
mean you to.
PowerPoint.
I gotta get to PowerPoint. Here's PowerPoint, here's full screen. And so, oops, hey, help. So like the book has flowers, the book has illustrations that I made that are funny, that are from the zine. The book has pictures of painters, that are illustrations, overtly illustrations. This is Frankenthaler making a painting. That was Benglis. This is the value per ounce of paint versus luxury goods. It's part of my color essay where I talk about the relationship between cocaine and oil paint. This is workers making cell phones in China. This is Frank Bowling. This is cartoons with like things where I'm talking about and thinking about like codes and shapes. This is something I made for a benefit to try to help kids in the cages near Mexico. And we put them in the book because we wanted to include this as kind of a drawing. This is a kind of transcription of a Lighty Churchman performance, a video performance that I drew. And like, there's Joan Mitchell sort of looking a little bit like me. I mean, just like any lady painter from behind trying to make a painting. So I'm gonna stop sharing, but so the book is loaded with drawings and cartoons and charts and graphs and jokes, lots of jokes. Here's more, jokes about the pandemic, what you look like during the pandemic, and captions, because I wanted the book to be a zine. And so the book is just sort of like a giant zine. It's like where you get to illustrate the book and you get to write the book. Actually, can I just say one really funny thing? I have this, I'm living out in the countryside. I mean, I'm living in a little town out of the city right now. And the guy who, the electrician came over to help me change this outdoor light bulb. And he's not in the art world at all. He's an electrician who lives here. He's a handyman. And I go, here, can I give you my book? I wrote a book and I also illustrated it. And he knows I'm an artist. And he looked at it and he went, wait, you wrote this? And I was like, yeah, and I also drew the pictures. And he went, you drew the pictures and you wrote the book? And I was so proud. It was my most proud moment when this guy Jack said, you wrote the book and drew the pictures? And I was like, yes, I did those things. It was super exciting.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. And it was fun to see.
Did that answer your question, Melissa? I forgot about the second part.
That was awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, you answered every aspect. Fabulous. Thank you. And thank you for showing those. I can't wait to, I don't have my copy yet. It's so beautiful.
Oh, I'll send you one.
Great. We've got Caroline queued up next. Caroline, you are live. Oh, yeah, you are.
Hello. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
I was actually reading Kafka recently, so I was receptive to what you were saying, and also about the fact that you like to anthropomorphize form. Actually, the bit that I was reading by him was his letters to Milena, in which he is writing how people ever gotten the idea that they could communicate with with one another by letter, and in fact that even like inventions like the telegraph or the telephone or the wireless, and maybe we can even include Zoom today, that there's always ghosts in between that, yeah, will prevent us from like de-distancing the world. And I think that's become like a big thing. So what interests me is how he's kind of anthropomorphizing the gaps. And you said that you were kind of possessed by bridging the planks, like bridging the abyss. And it seems to me that this is a thing that might connect a lot of people in their aspirations, or in their, let's say, what drives them to either paint or write, whatever medium they choose. I think even in a social way, a moment that we're living in right now is a lot about de-distancing, even this talk perhaps, and the way we are doing it. So yeah, I felt that part resonated most with me, whether we're talking about form or color or shape. Maybe all of these are forms of de-distancing. It's not really a question, but perhaps more like a commentary on what resonated.
Thank you very, very much. Should I read the really beautiful little couple sentences of Kafka that I was thinking of, that I was referring to? I
That
will,
would be
because
great.
it's just a little part. It was that a friend of mine, Dana DiGiulio, happened to post it on Instagram, and I saw it and I really loved it. It's, I think, from his notebooks or something. It says, metaphors are one among many things which make me despair of writing. Writing's lack of independence of the world, its dependence on the maid who tends the fire, on the cat warming itself by the stove. It is even dependent on the poor old human being warming himself by the stove. All these are independent activities ruled by their own laws. Only writing is helpless, cannot live in itself, is a joke and a despair. And I thought that was notable. It's not the de-distancing, the kind of positive, groping toward one another that you're talking about. It's the more despairing distancing. But I know what you mean, because I think we're living in this strange period that is riddled with these aporia and gaps and nightmares and holes and lacks and emptinesses and you know, all of that makes a very abstract texture, you know, the surface of life, this strange pocked surface.
Yeah, it's maybe even like this collective disconnection can, yeah, allow for some kind of feeling of relatedness.
Well, or maybe just commonality,
Yeah.
because I don't think being related makes you necessarily feel good, but I think there's something important about the group melancholy that we have.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, those are all the questions we have for the time being. I was thinking this might be a good opportunity for you to play that audio clip if you're still game.
Oh, if you have time, I mean, do we have time for this? I just wanted, I told David and Sophia and Annette earlier that the one thing I thought would be really cool was to just at the end, if we had time, the last essay I wrote for the book that we threw in at the end was, I was asked by Karma Gallery to write about the paintings, these watercolors, these 9 watercolors of Louise Fishman, who's an abstract painter whom I very much love and admire. And I said, like I always do, like David said in the beginning, well, send me everything that's been written about her so I can study up. And I noticed that in the writing about her, they always said something about how masculine gestural abstraction is, because she makes those kind of paintings, but they never said anything about another thing that I think is always claimed as masculine, which is sports. And so I thought, hey, I'll just write about her like she was a sports person, not like a masculine abstract expressionist, but like a masculine, and these are with quotes around it, sports player. I'll write about her in baseball language. So I combed through for weeks dictionaries of the reading, you know, the sports casting that's done on the radio. And I found out in my research that there's this thing called a color commentator, which I think is really funny, because there's 2 kinds of baseball commentators. One tells you what's actually going on, and the other one dolls it up with crazy, you know, lingo. So I wrote all of the actions of her work in the form of baseball calls, like she was the person, both the pitcher and the batter. And I just wrote it up in baseball lingo. And then I called this friend of mine who's a wonderful person named Ross Clavin, who used to be the sportscaster on 1010 Wins News Radio. And he would literally read the news on the sportscast. And I asked him to read it out loud, and he read it out loud. So I'm just gonna play you like 1 minute of it. I gotta do this again. I gotta share. Okay, you can see my thing. Now I gotta go back. Sorry, gotta go back to the beginning. I'm gonna play the very beginning, inning 1 of, and I'm gonna turn off my sound so you can hear it. I'm gonna play inning 1 of this thing about Louise Fishman.
Hey, hello.
It might be worth checking off that.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Chunk of emerald mud tilted up towards right field, and the grass is hooker's green. We're all wondering what to expect, and we are underway. Here comes Fishman out to the mound. She is a fire plug, a 5-foot utility slinger, a northpaw with a real cannon. Originally out of the Philly Club, with some time spent in Illinois, and now, of course, New York City. She is known for really being in the paint, throwing out some gritty, cruddy, besmirched-looking stuff, but with static, some flounce and some bounce, and the result is a picture of motion. You never know. Today, she might go wild in the strike zone. Right now, she's throwing out fungo with a rugged, clattering, chunky, sullied or proper. Fishman's not likely to surrender any crooked numbers. And she's reading signs as she goes into her windup, and bang! Right out from under. A gray wedge grooves up the alley, tilting low and across it. Holy cow! It's a cement mixer. And
I'm stopping it. Oops, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got to get out of share. Anyway, it goes on for the whole game. It goes on for 9 innings, and it's really great. I love it so much. I love it more than almost anything I've made since the pandemic, except for my painting show. And it's really cool. It's amazing. And seriously, Ross Clavin is a genius. I sent him the text of all 9 innings. It's like a 15-minute baseball game, and he read it perfectly and sent it back to me.
Is there anywhere people, I'm seeing in the chat, everybody,
You're not, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Wait. Oh, I can now, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Everyone is expressing their great love in the chat. Is there anywhere that they can see it? They can, listen to it online afterwards?
You know what I'd have to do? I have all 9 innings edited as an MP4. So what I'd have to do is I'd have to put it out to you, and I don't know how to do that. I don't even know how to export it from my iTunes. If anybody knows how to export my file from my iTunes, somebody call me up and help me, and I'll put it in the world. But I tried to give it, you got to hear it. It's amazing. But you can also just read the thing. But the sonic thing of that thing is beyond, seriously beyond. And I don't really know how to like get it out in the world, but maybe I can put it on my website.
I'll midwife.
I'll put it on my, all right, somebody will help me. I'll put it on my website, amysillman.com.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I think everyone would love to hear all 9 innings. Well,
I think, wait, I just want to say, I think Louise and her partner Ingrid offered it to the Baseball Hall of Fame where they live near, because they live near Cooperstown. And I don't think that I heard that they accepted it, but they should.
It's got to go to Cooperstown. Absolutely.
It's got to go.
Awesome. Well, Levi, any final words?
No, just thanks, Amy, for doing this. And everybody go out and get the book. It's great. And I don't know whether they printed enough of them. It might be gone pretty soon. So get it now. Get it while it's hot.
Maybe
Thanks,
they'll
Amy.
print a second one. Thank you. I want to thank you all so much for your questions and your help and your asking me to do this and coming to this. And I can't thank everyone enough. And I'm so honored to have this book. And thank you again, most profoundly to After 8 Books in Paris, who are geniuses. Oh, and I forgot to say that the book is studded with incredible footnotes that the editor put in. So it's an incredible piece of research, not just of mine, but the After 8 people. And thank you also to Barbara Gladstone Gallery for having my show up and selling the book at their desk.
We love to see it. Well, yeah, thank you both so much. This has been a pleasure. And we've got people tuning in from Australia, from Belgium, from New York, from all over the world. So feel free to turn on your mics as you leave to shout out your goodbyes. Let's create.
Wait, it says book not available. It says book not available, but I don't think that's true. Book is available.
I just bought it this minute on Amazon. It's totally available.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thanks so much.